Welcome to session 6, really dealing with the throne and the innumerable number around the throne and what throne this is and what constitutes the innumerable number. And I went through the math of the impossibility of enough people coming out of the tribulation being saved. That's more than the population was on the earth even before the tribulation began. And so there's some serious twisting to try and fit a doctrinal position, dispensationalism, which probably has some benefits, but the errors stunningly outweigh the good. I'll just say that. I'm putting it out there. Another one, just that I want to end this series, to just talk with you about it a little bit, just to cause you to think about it. That's a good place to start. We have to actually be willing to even think about some of these things. We won't. Some people I've seen over the years, they won't even bother to think about it. No, I know. My mind's made up. You're wrong. You're a heretic. You're a weirdo. Whatever. But the dispensational position is that the rapture takes place roughly around Revelation chapter 4, and they're caught up to the throne, and then we see the scene of the 24 elders, and they're around the throne, and they are casting their crowns before the Lord. Well, the Lord is standing beside. He's not even sitting on the throne. But anyway, I trivialize it. And then the conclusion is, because there's no more mention of the church from then on in the book of Revelation, it implies that the church has been raptured to the heavens. And you cannot solve this. I'm sorry, but this really troubles me. And I'm not mentioning any names, but I know a dear brother, and he early on in my experience with him, he passed me by one time in the building, and he said, "Oh, well, it doesn't matter because we're just going to cast our crowns at the Lord anyway, so what's the big deal?" I tell you, before God, that burnt all the way into my being and haunted me daily. This was repeated by the same person on at least 2 other occasions with the same response. Eventually, I wrote him a loving letter, and I gave him a copy of my book, The Gardener's Field. At least it touches on it a little bit in this book. There are so many discrepancies to that. First of all, the rapture of the believer doesn't go to the third heavens. It goes to the air. This is just basic, solid, basic things. When we've just covered it in the last session, Paul wrote to the church in Thessalonica, and he said, no, the end of the tribulation, this will happen. The dead will rise first, and we who are alive and remain, that means some have already gone, will be caught up to meet the Lord in the air. And so shall we ever be with the Lord. Some will be in the air in the New Jerusalem during the millennium. Those will be the overcoming believers, but the majority of the redeemed, as well as the restored nations and the Jewish people, will be on the restored earth during the millennial period of time. It's going to be exciting. Now, the Lord said this. He said, when he comes, coming isn't going. At least it didn't used to be anyway. I mean, everything is changing. Maybe that's changing too. But when he comes, he said, he's bringing his reward with him. With him. To give to every man, whether good or bad, whatever. He's bringing it with him. Where is he bringing it to? He's bringing it to the bema at the judgment seat of Christ in the air upon the rapture, or the caught up, biblically. We'll be caught up together to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Wherefore comfort one another with these words. Let me ask you, we're just talking here now. Let me ask you, who in the heavenlies would you say is reigning with the Lord currently? Not believers. I'm not talking about believers. I'm talking about the angelic hosts are the ones, right? I mean, who knows how many angels we wore out in our lifetime. Wow, it's just incredible. But these are 24 elders. The number 24 really has no relationship to the church whatsoever as a number. The second thing is they're casting their crowns, and John's caught up there, and they're casting their crowns. Just for the fun of it, just humor me, okay? There has currently been an election, a federal election in the United States, where one ruling government has expired its time in government and another government is taking over. Joe Biden and the Democratic Party did not win the election, and therefore their term in office will expire officially on January the 20th, 4 days after I turn 78. And then Donald Trump and his administration will take over the White House, the government, and rule the United States of America and influence the nations of the world. When this is taking place, things are closing so that others can open. Crowns in the Bible may imply some sort of reward, but mainly they speak of authority. When Peter said, Lord, what are we going to get? We've left everything to follow you. What are we going to get? The Lord didn't shame him. He didn't say, man, you are ungrateful. I have died for you. I've given you eternal life. What do you want? He didn't. He said, you will sit on 12 thrones, judging. Those elders sat on thrones. They were ruling as angels, ruling in God's government up to this point. But when the millennium is going to take over and the overcoming believers who are going to then reign with Christ during the millennium and then on into eternity, the reign of the elders will be over. They will hand in their security pass. They will give up their uniform, because the saints will be ruling. And we go a little farther in chapter 7 there, we see these saints sitting on thrones and all this kind of thing. This is the reality of the promises the Lord has made, that if you suffer with me, you will reign with me. But that scene in heaven is by no means the rapture of the church. First of all, they're not being taken to the third heavens. Secondly, the Lord himself says he is bringing his reward with him. And thirdly, he says that you will reign. And he told people in Corinth, in the church in Corinth, they just couldn't get along. He said, man, don't you guys know you're going to judge angels? When will that happen? At the turn of the age. The overcoming believers have been promised to the Lord, you'll reign with me. And during the millennial reign, the overcoming believers will be in a position of honor and power and authority along with the Lord. And then for eternity, every born again, blood-washed, transformed, and glorified believer will reign with him over his kingdom, which will continue to expand, because we have the nations who will be healed by the trees of the life, the leaves of the tree of life. In the Old Testament, God promised, he said, he would visit the problems to the third and fourth generation of those who don't care for him, but to thousands of those who fear him and keep his word. The thousands there, everyone agrees, it means thousands of generations. But if you add up the generations from Adam to Christ, and then Christ to the millennium, and millennium through the millennium, it could be around 300 generations. That's not even close to 1,000 generations. So as I close this set, consider this. The nations will procreate normally and naturally. In the eternity, they will be restored by the leaves of the tree of life, and there's no hint that procreation will end. That passage in the Old Testament where the Lord says he will extend his mercy to thousands, and many translations they put in there of generations. Well, if that means thousands of generations, I did the math on it of like 300 generations. If you multiply each generation by 30 years, for example, and then you multiply that by 700, which would be 700 left out of 1,000, that would be 21,000 years representing one generation, and he said to thousands. What if the entire universe, it's all sitting there, galaxy after galaxy after galaxy, for eternity, the Lord will populate that with people who are restored and healed by the leaves of the tree of life, and he will have the nations and the church, and he'll have the Jewish sector there in some fashion or other. Give no offense to the Jew, the Gentile, or the Church of God. Now, I know this will just about blow your heads off if you're an evangelical believer, which just has saved and lost. But that's not a great mystery. Be honest with you. It doesn't captivate you. You got so many other things that you fill your life with because, okay, I died, I gave my life to Jesus, I'm going to heaven, and that's not all believers, but there's a wide swath like this. I see it. I've served for 60 years trying to serve the Lord among the church. Part of it, at least part of it, is because we have not given them the vision of what God is up to. We have hid it. We haven't wanted to learn it. We've ignored it. We've said, oh no, God couldn't do that. We put him in a box, and on and on and on. We come up with theological packages like dispensationalism, which swept North America in the late 1800s and early 1900s with John Nelson Darby. The church was not doing well right then, and this was a great boost to them because it just put candy in their dish. Oh no, you won't go through the tribulation. You're going to go to heaven and get a mansion and this and that and that and that. I read John Nelson Darby's statement about the judgment seat of Christ. It's posted on YouTube. It's a little hard to find, but it's there. And basically he says it's a no big deal because we've all been forgiven anyway. And what's he going to judge us for? Because we've already been forgiven and he loves us. And so as a result, anybody who follows a dispensational theological package, they make no emphasis about the judgment seat of Christ. They make no emphasis at all. I told you in another video, two people that I studied that spoke of this was David Jeremiah briefly, but Charles Stanley had a stronger emphasis on it, and he wrote a book. I'll conclude with this. He wrote a book, and he put 1 Corinthians 3 as the reason to prove eternal security is there, because even if everything burns up at the Bema, it says you will still be saved, yet as through fire. Well, I've enjoyed doing these series. I hope you enjoy them on YouTube. God bless you. Take these things to the Lord. Mean business with him.